speak to you extensively to try and clarify to the nation critical issues that I think at the beginning of the year must be unequivocally understood without an iota of contradiction. And it's my intention that after this interaction we shall have no questions arising as to our purpose, as to our direction, and ultimately our intention as the DA. I would like to initially thank you for the work, for the space we shared, for the contradictions resolved together in the last year, for the quarrels we shared and resolved in the last year, and ultimately our resolve today to say, whichever the case, we have a duty to move forward. So welcome to the DA. I have one major issue for today, but because of the matters that arise in our political space on a daily basis, I'll begin with what I construe as a relatively small matter, because it's not mundane. It's a matter that has been in our space, albeit coached by the actors in different languages, albeit presented differently in different spaces. But I want to speak about it in my initial statement so that it does not arise either from your questions or any other interaction. Namely, that at the beginning of the year, in his end of year message, the general at the helm of the state, Hon Mathias, informed the nation that it is his intention to offer directives to the banning of bail and bonds where necessary. And I'm here to say this, that Mr. Mathias was not saying anything new. He's actually been implementing it. You have been reporting about so many citizens that have been in jail for more than 4 years, activists in prison without going to court for more than 2-3 years, 4 years, including those released at the court-martial in suspicious legal circumstances. So did he have to make an announcement anew to that? You're also aware that there are so many citizens that have been in police cells, including those that have been maimed in police cells, and the police officials, the authorities are aware of this, so there's nothing new. The only issue Hon Mathias was reminding the country was that he's still at it. And now that we are going into a potentially electric political period, he was probably reminding the political actors in all spaces that he's probably going to heighten his stronghold on the state structure, including the police, but also extend his dirty hand into the judiciary. It was simply a reminder. So there was nothing new from us that have been around. You are aware that myself and the colleagues in Parliament for the last 3 years have been pursuing justice for so many young activists that are rotting in jail, including the missing for the last 4 years. So if any one of you thinks that that was a new statement from Mr. Mathias, I'm here to inform you that he was just reminding the country of what he's been doing. And therefore, there was nothing new. And therefore, for us at the DA, part of our resolve in the next couple of months and subsequently is to make sure that such impunity and abuse of processes of court and state is stopped. That's all we are here to call upon all and sundry to follow, to demand that Hon Mathias stops henceforth the abuse of state power and stops his interference with the work of the judiciary, because the judiciary is not an extension of the executive. The judiciary must be left to perform its duty independently. But the judiciary and judicial officers must not succumb to the pressure from the state, because they have a constitutional mandate to discharge justice without regard to undue interference from wherever and from whoever. I thought that should come at the beginning of my address, so that we do not have contradiction as to what our views are. Our views are that nothing has changed. It's the same thing we are fighting to change, to ensure that impunity stops in our midst. I want to embark on the gist of my communication today to the nation. Over the last 1 month plus, public space has been awash with what the DA is about. Initially, there were conversations inconclusive as to what I had tabled before Parliament as electoral and constitutional reforms. And today, I have invited you to share a compressed version of these issues, such that nobody misconstrues our intentions. Initially, I want to state that, like I said at my last briefing to the nation, that we had written to majority political actors, platforms, informing them of our intention to interact. A few have not yet received these letters because offices were closed for the festive season, and beginning today we have embarked on transmitting these communications, and we hope we'll be able to interact with these different political platforms, including civic or citizen platforms, informal civil society organizations, to discuss the contents of our intentions as the DA. We have received a nod of positivity informally from some of them. We are going to formalize these interactions, and we shall be informing you as the fourth estate that we can share the sentiments and the views of the different actors with the rest of the nation. Now, the most important issue is what is the DA's national transition and reform proposal about, because I have seen media commentators not necessarily misrepresenting, but probably misconstruing what this was. You know, these are new concepts to majority of the generation here and in most media houses. So you hear commentary totally different from what we are talking about here. And I blame no one, because issues of reforms, transitions are alien issues to our space. We are used to processes where the outgoing is the incoming, and therefore you have no conversation about a possibility of a reform or a transition. And how can I blame a media practitioner who is 30 years or 40 years, who has never seen a transition, who has never seen a change? So these are alien concepts, and I am here to share with you a simplified, a condensed version of these issues that you can inform the country as to what exactly we're trying to do, and re-energize and rekindle the spirit of this nation before it collapses on our backs. And our proposal at the DA is aimed at forming a basis for a national conversation, national discussion, and a debate and dialogue on the future of Uganda. And note, these are our objectives. Other people can add theirs, but these are our objectives. They are essentially 6 in propagating the idea of a national transition and reform processes. The reform processes we have talked about variously. It involves reforming a number of laws, including amending the national constitution. But to break down the principal 6 objectives: 1, to ensure key constitutional, electoral, and administrative reforms that should be effected before the next general election. Our intention is to make sure that before the next general election, potentially in January next year, we undertake critical legal or critical constitutional and political reforms before we're enthusiastic about participating in the next election. And I'll expound more on what that is about. 2, to ensure the conduct of non-violent, free, fair, credible, verifiable, and consequential elections. Some electoral processes are actually being inconsequential. I'll give you an example. For the bulk of the last elections in which I've been active, call them probably 6 of them, the only consequential outcome has only been limited to local governments and parliament. The presidency has been insulated from any consequence. That's why the media will say the incoming is the outgoing is actually the incoming. So there's no conversation as to the possibility. Say, what if the incumbent collapses in an election? What happens? So what if the incumbent is thoroughly defeated without an iota of doubt and he hangs on? What happens? So we want a conversation because we want to have an idea of what looks like a free, fair, credible, and verifiable elections. You remember in the last 3 elections, Dr. Kizza Besigye was consistent in saying, if you think I lost, can we go ahead and verify and authenticate the nature of my loss? Can we go ahead and authenticate the nature of my opponent's victory? That has never happened. So we are saying, before we go into the next election, there must be a framework capable of providing verification for the consequences or the outcomes of an election. 3, to buttress mechanisms that guarantee peaceful and smooth transfer of power from one leader to another. Apparently, there's no such mechanism because we do not have a Presidential Transition Act. We don't have a mechanism that guarantees what happens to those who leave power. People hang on to power sometimes because they fear that there's no framework to insulate them from the crimes they have committed while in power. We want to have an arrangement of guarantees, an arrangement of ensuring that those who leave power actually don't leave the country. So if they have committed crimes against the citizens, there must be a framework of understanding the nature of crimes. Are they crimes in personam? Are they state crimes? So where's the framework? 4, to campaign for the implementation of a national reconciliation and reparation plan. Gentlemen and ladies, so much has been going on over the last 40 years under the leadership of Hon Mathias and his people. We surely know that there are so many injured citizens, there are so many affected citizens, and somehow the political actors believe that they can be ignored. We don't think so. A nation that ignores the injured is a nation of fools. I don't think we are. We cannot afford the luxury of ignoring citizens that have been injured over time. So what will happen to citizens whose children have disappeared under the auspices of Hon Mathias and his people? Should we simply say they melted away like ice? We need a framework of truth-telling so that the country can heal from the effects, from the ravages of bad governance as we usher in a new epoch of leadership that appreciates the values of our people, that appreciates the values of human rights, the values of association and disagreement. So it's our belief that this is lacking. That's why disagreements make people get gray hair, because there's no framework for resolving them. If you disagree, you take the fastest flight when a regime changes. We cannot build a nation in that kind of arrangement. 6, to buttress mechanisms that guarantee continuity of peace, stability, progress, and prosperity for all Ugandans. We all know how power has been abused in this country. Now, at this stage in our country, who is the guarantor of our national security? Because the national security system has been abused by an individual. Who is the guarantor of our elections? Because all elections have been tinkered with. as people gear up to go and participate in the next election, who is the guarantor of a free and fair electoral process without turning the election into a ritual of sorts? We hesitate as DA to encourage citizens to simply go into a ritual and simply look on as their tear gassed away, and then they wait for a declaration, and then say new day, normal stuff. It's not a normal situation. We believe that we must have guarantees, because the current security framework cannot guarantee national security. It is repressive, it is partisan. We need a conversation to the guarantees of our security, the guarantees of our electoral outcomes, and how this can be done. I can understand these are really mundane issues. They are alien concepts, because we are used to being ruled over like animals. We are saying, we are human, and therefore there must be full participation and understanding of why we participate in politics. Otherwise, we can agree to become a basket case. Okay? In the DA, we are saying we cannot be part of the basket process. We need a very clear process that can guarantee that the outcome of an electoral process is going to be consequential, positively, to the lives of our common peoples. So essentially, those are the 6 objectives for which we clamor for reforms and a transitional framework. I thought that must be made very clear to all. Now, who are the stakeholders in all this? Because it's very important to understand that who are the stakeholders? You and me belong to a multiplicity of platforms. We have political actors, we have civil society actors, we have citizen platforms, we have cultural institutions, we have religious bodies, we have senior citizens. So Uganda has bona fide owners. This is not a land of no one. It's not a no man's land. So these stakeholders are the ones we need to be part of this conversation. I have heard people say that we are talking about very nice things, but General Museveni won't accept. Who tells you that we are here to massage General Museveni? We must compel General Museveni and his people to listen to the people. He must be compelled to listen. Whoever thinks that our job is to take some massage oil to him, no. We are saying all must demand for these. The media, civil society, culture, religious institutions, senior citizens must demand that General Museveni listens. This is not his father's estate. It's a bequest to all of us. And therefore we have a stake in how this bequest is being managed. And therefore a demand using multiple voices is legitimate. That's what we are here for. To remind these stakeholders
new way, new day,
that these demands are legitimate. We're not trying to impose our views on anybody. We are simply saying this can't continue as normal. Now, comrades, we have set ourselves as the DA a framework we want to share with stakeholders, a form of agenda. Okay, an agenda of sorts, because we believe, and honestly believe so, that all these objectives may not be achieved in a single go. They are multiple, and some of them are multi-stage. They have a multiple stakeholding arrangement. Some of them will have to require the high and mighty to climb down their high horses to listen. And they may require pep talk. Some of them are simply scared out of their skins. And therefore we need a cascaded framework, a form of agenda from one issue to another. So can we have a national conversation as to how this parliament can be downsized? So when we discuss devolution, we cannot be discussing devolution and expansion in the same statement. Okay? We agree. If we want to devolve, then we must have some MPs can become councillors in their areas and influence local issues. I'm not trying to really downplay their quality. No, you are not any less of quality because you're a councillor. You're a leader of your people. Some MPs can become governors of their communities. Who knows that his guarantee is going to be in the next parliament? So I'm speaking generally about myself and everyone else. That is the courage we need from our leaders. Not simply, appetite to participate in elections regardless of their consequences. Time has come when we, without contradiction, speak about the possibilities and the impossibilities. So I'm now telling you that if nothing is done, the next parliament will be 600 and more. Remember, the structure of our economy is increasingly becoming narrow and narrow. So we have increasingly more mouth to feed and a lot more appetite than the resources at our disposal. So must we expand, political offices, or we need to really expand the framework for service provision in the country. So I have mentioned the acts put before Parliament, including the Presidential Elections Act for amendment, the Parliamentary Elections Act for amendment, the Law Government Act for amendment, the Political Parties and the Other Organizations Act for amendment. Critically, what we are targeting as the DA in the Political Parties Act, the way it was framed, it was actually enacted in bad faith. Political parties, for example, are almost incapable of forming a registered coalition. I have heard comrades in the other political platforms talk about their willingness to work with the others. You cannot register that kind of arrangement. So what was the spirit of enacting that law? We are saying that law is due for amendment to make it possible for platforms to work together in a registrable legal framework. That's our intention. So that we do not have scattered multiple, groupings that are inconsequential and incapable of changing our electoral and political platform. I think I talked about the other electoral, the laws. I talked about amending the Electoral Commission Act with a view to doing two things. One, to allow for the voting of the diaspora citizens. There are over 2 million people voting. So the EC can use our missions and the embassies as polling stations for both registration and voting. Two, the voting of prisoners. Yes, prisoners. It's not that you lose every right when you're a prisoner. And we have, we are saying that the only prisoners that cannot vote are those on the death row. Because the presumption of law is that when you're on the death row, you are literally decommissioned as a living person. So the rest must have their rights respected. Luckily, that subject has been litigated upon, and in 2021, court hammered down a decision to say that the Electoral Commission not making provision for the voting of diaspora and prisoners is a violation of their constitutional right. Therefore, it's not really requiring of us to go to the moon to have the EC Act amended and make provision for the voting. Prisoners can be registered in their prisons where they are domiciled, and the diaspora at the embassies and missions where they live. So we thought these are issues we need to clarify. Then, of course, I talked about administrative reforms. This refer to amending and administering reforms to key state agencies and arms of government. The judiciary is due for reform. On another day, probably I can share with you the feel I have on how the judiciary should be reformed, including an environment where judicial officers can be voted by the people. If you want to be a magistrate in Masaka, people of Masaka should vote on you to be their magistrate. They should be able to see a sense of fairness and understanding in you to be their magistrate. They should not be imposed by the government in power everywhere. The government in power the president can appoint Supreme Court judges, probably judges of the Court of Appeal. Our view is that time has come to have a conversation on how other judicial officers beyond apparent courts can be voted by the people. These are very broad ideas that need a compressed conversation. We are from stakeholders. We believe that the educational reforms are long overdue. Reforms in health are long overdue. Why don't we have national health insurance? For example, small nations have insurance. Why can't citizens be treated by the state? Citizens that have terminal illnesses, cancers, heart patients, be treated by the state. These need reforms. So if the NRM thinks that we are a growing economy, why are we growing in numbers and not growing in service? So we need a conversation. So these are not really very far issues from us. We need reforms in agriculture, in energy, in mineral resources. For example, we all know how mineral resources are being siphoned from this country and benefiting a few. Some of you in the media space have reported on people siphoning gold, siphoning rare earth, siphoning, all sorts of minerals. You know better than me probably. Who is speaking about this? In Parliament, you remember me demanding for the payment of taxes on gold and how I was suffocated on this debate. And members of Parliament did not care about this matter. They thought it's a small matter. Those are your MPs. So we need a conversation on these resources and how they benefit the nation. At the DA, we are not cowards. We want this conversation on the floor for citizens to make their input. Of course, that we want the citizens to participate into. You heard the other day our brothers and sisters, the Banyarwanda, complain about discrimination. So which kind of state, which kind of nation is not capable of telling who are their citizens that can actually acquire national IDs and passports? That you must have a petition in Parliament. So at what stage do you determine one's right of citizenry? So this is a conversation that we must participate into as citizens. So friends, I have talked about our reform and transitional agenda. And I want to repeat that when all this is done, we want to see 6 things in a cascading order. 1, a framework for the national transition. 2, establishment of a national transitional council. 3, a national transitional agenda. If you are going to transition, what's the agenda? 4, leadership of the National Transitional Council. So we want the country to transition. So who are the leaders that people listen to and understand and respect? Not everybody in a suit and with a tie. So we want to understand. We must have a framework on who's going to contribute to this arrangement. Then 5, a framework for implementing outcomes of the transition. So if you agree, so how are we going to implement the transitional issues? Because there is mistrust across the spectrum, because the citizens do not trust so many people, including their leaders, we must have a framework. Probably we need to understand who can chair a transitional framework in a divided country like Uganda, in a cultural and ethnic political melting pot that we are. Can we get an external person? Are we going to get a Supreme Court judge? Are we going to get a religious leader? Are we going to import somebody probably neutral and therefore not aligned to our divisions to chair a council to transition? From where I sit, from my vintage position, we are a nation on the threshold, and therefore denial of our existence, denial of our situation is the biggest danger. For anybody to imagine that all is okay because the Electoral Commission has provided a roadmap for the next election, and then you go and bring out your best suit for nomination, you are an enemy of this nation. We need to have a conversation fast. There are so many positions for people to stand, and there are so many for people to lose. So the hurry in I want to stand, the hurry in this is mine. We are saying the probability of you getting what you want is higher with the reforms and the different enactments. There's a high propensity of you losing in the current framework For those who are very enthusiastic about the next election, I'm only warning you that please don't go for a ritual. Let's make some demands, critical demands, and then agree on the nature of their implementation. So today I thought I should break down these small issues for us to understand them with clarity, so that the question that will arise will address the nature of these issues I have put across, without any import. Don't import issues that we have not talked about. That's our space, that's our view. DA? 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 New day? Time frame. Yes, I am alive to the constraints of time. But I'm saying that I'm not oblivious of what time heralds. But I'm saying all these electoral and constitutional reforms may not be achieved in a single go. I explained earlier, I think in an earlier address, that some of the constitutional reforms, because the Constitution makes provision for 3 possibilities of amendment. In Article 260, we can amend the Constitution with the Parliament, 2/3, and then a referendum. That some issues can be amended through parliamentary resolution and then a referendum by the people. Which is why one of the amendments I'm taking to Parliament is that on polling day we should have a referendum ballot paper to answer to key issues that require a national referendum. Because the excuse has always been that we don't have resources to conduct a referendum. We are probably the only nation that is incapable of responding to citizen concerns for over 20 years. There are so many lingering questions that require citizens to answer back. By the way, including the question that General Museveni wants to make a person like bail. If he has issues with bail, let him take the question to the people. They will answer him back. You have problems with bond. Let him go to the citizens who are affected by the inefficiencies of government. How can you say you want to do away with the bond when you don't have prosecutors? When you don't have magistrates? Who speaks about that? So I think General Museveni is tired, real tired. Let him take that question to the people through a referendum. He will get the answer he wants. So, we are alive to time. In 261, we can amend the Constitution as Parliament 2/3 and local government 2/3. That time we have. Parliament has enough time with local governments to amend those areas that require Parliament and local governments. Then in 262, Parliament alone, the area that require Parliament alone. So Parliament has time. It's only clumsiness and ill will. So if goodwill prevails, the question of time is not a big issue for all the intended amendments. It has for some, but also we have a remedy in terms of cascading them. And then the outcomes can be implemented by the next government. I'm strictly talking about governance. Okay? Then Mr. Chigundu, that we might fail in our bid because of the numbers. Yes, we are not blind to the numbers. We are saying we shall talk to the numbers. It's not true that all members of Parliament from the NRM are blind. I have spoken to very decent men and women in the NRM, in Parliament. They are there. And they are very concerned about the future of this country. All we need is to have a warm conversation. You remember the debate in Tojukwatako? Remember how we were able to swing in numbers? Of course, at the end of the day, it was not swung by Parliament, but by the military. Those who were around. I still believe that we can overcome the past and rethink afresh about this country. I'm very aware of well-meaning members of Parliament from the ruling party that want this conversation to be part of our national polity. So the numbers, yes, but the numbers can be talked to, and then we decide for the good of our people. Annette, the almost same question, the NSF. Of course, the National Consultative Forum is a constitutional platform which is dead. It's dysfunctional. In fact, the issues we are discussing should have been, forwarded by the NCF. Where are the outcomes of their meetings? Is it allowances? They sit. We vote for them money in Parliament through the Electoral Commission. What are they doing? Let them come out to complain and say things are not working, and we disband them. Then we can know they are non-existent. So we understand their frustration, but it's not enough to be frustrated. Act on your frustration. See, for me, giving up is not an option. And nobody should ever hide behind frustration, not to act on duty. We are inviting them to act on their duty as a constitutional body. Mr. Waiswa Busogawan, yes, I can understand your frustration. And I'm inviting you, now that you have a very potent platform, to speak to citizens to raise and make these demands. In the 10th Parliament, there was a conversation about the possibility of a national medical insurance, but that conversation was dropped and excuses were brought. We can compel any government in power to implement that as a priority. If you're not prioritizing public health, people's health, education, and services, basic services, then what is your priority? So we believe that this can be, even smaller nations with leaner budgets like Rwanda have a national insurance, health insurance scheme. So it's a question of demanding. And for us on our side as the DA, that would be our electoral platform, part of our electoral platform, national health insurance. And we cannot apologize for demanding for it. Mr. Sechunga, yes, what other parties are doing. No, I am concerned, but I'm not worried. Concern is that they must be alive to the reality. Concerned that what they are doing is grandstanding. Concerned that they have been part of the past and therefore they must be alive to the present. That does not scare me from reaching out. We are talking to all those platforms, even those who are saying they're ready for the next nomination. We're saying, no, before you iron your coat, please listen. It's a rainy day. Will you first put on a rainy coat? Because you reach dripped. Even your nomination papers will be torn by the rains. Can you deal with the bad weather before you raise your appetite for the next election? That's the message you are putting across. And we are putting across humbly to these platforms. Okay? We are alive to their situation. Which is why, as leaders, we cannot ignore these young people. Like I said earlier on, these are young and talented people that have been ignored by society. In fact, their exhibition over the weekend is a confirmation of the fact that they have been ignored and therefore they chose their own way. I'm here to inform you that we are not going to give up on them. We are not going to give up on Mr. Murwan and others like him. We have a history of rescuing his ilk, and some of them have turned into very important citizens. So he will not be the first to be rescued. No, we have rescued many of his ilk. Some have even assumed very important national offices. So please, be assured that we are not going to give up on him. We fully understand his challenges. That's why we endeavor. When we said we are going to work with him, we are not promising to work with him on an event. No, we're not preparing a festival with him. It's a long haul because they have been at it for years. They are a lost generation. You cannot change a generational tide in one day. I want to assure the nation that we are not going to give up on these young citizens. We owe them a duty of care to make sure that they actually overcome their current troubles and be noble citizens. That's when they will benefit from their latent talent. I commit. Mr. Sechunga, what's the threat? To which I agree with your assertion that, that's why I'm saying that we are not here to collect gallons of oil to go and massage the ego of one General Museveni. We are here to collect to summon the collective spirit of the nation, to demand from him. Okay? And like we promised that beginning this month, we are going to be out to talk to citizens. We're not going to incite citizens. We're going to remind every citizen of their duty to demand for a free and fair electoral process. That's what we are going to do. And that's what we ask of ourselves and our other colleagues. Please do not Do not reserve your energy for 2026 to demand for Mr. Byabakama to declare you. Use that energy now to demand for a free and fair electoral process. That's what we are telling colleagues at different political platforms, that please, that energy you are saving for campaigns, first use it, because that campaign will be inconsequential unless you have used part of it to demand for a fair electoral process. That's when you have the proposition and possibility. Otherwise, the propensity of this being a ritual is quite high. So I agree, and therefore we must raise the threshold of risk and threat for those with the power, including speaking to their own personal fears. We must understand that sometimes people that have power, and especially that have abused power, have fears. When this conversation becomes a reality, these fears must be spoken to, and therefore we should be able to evolve and exit. We are trying to oust a well-fed cat, threatened, with all attendant,